All right, welcome back to the beautiful Pacific Northwest, PacWest Bigfoot, the land of plaid and coffee. And I'm going to tell you this real quick. First and foremost, Merry Christmas. One more time before I don't get to say it anymore this year. Merry Christmas to you and yours. And I'm going to tell you this real quick. I have absolutely loved just being here with you this year with PacWest Bigfoot. I know that towards the end of the summer I was trying to move to more of an every week kind of format for you. And before I get on, I have a little kind of a long-winded intro today. Not too long-winded, but before we get to our story, I just had a couple things to say. I just wanted to say thank you so very much. I know that a lot of you guys out here are purists, you're researchers, and I'm just glad that I can bring kind of the entertainment side of this to you when you can't be out there. I mean, that is my whole goal here. You know, I take some of these reports that I find, I take reports that you guys give me, and I turn them into, or I try to turn them into the best awesome campfire stories that I can to keep you in that, keep the Bigfoot spirits in you, okay? And that's what I'm trying to do here. That's my goal. And I just want to say that here on out, starting the beginning of the new year, literally I am going to try to move back to a weekly format for you. I'm going to try my best, okay? Now, I can't guarantee every week, but I'm going to try to get them out there every week that I can. So anyways, I wanted to move on to a real quick subject real quick. I was talking to a friend of mine who is actually a few of my good friends out here who are very well known, I guess you would say, in the Bigfoot circles. And I was telling him maybe that's the problem. Maybe there shouldn't be Bigfoot circles. You know, I have to tell you, I get my share of, what do they call that, trolls and stuff online. But, you know, the one thing that is my prayer for next year, and I'm a believer, and I have to tell you, I've had my own experiences with Bigfoot. I've seen the sign. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I may be, that kind of entertainment side of things, but I really rely on you guys out here who are really into that kind of pure research, doing a lot of research, looking at all the evidence at hand and everything. What I don't get, and what I do see from time to time, and I'm finally going to make my own voice heard about it, is the fact that there is too much snippy, mean girls, mean boys things going on out here. People bagging on each other, ragging on each other, tearing each other apart. For goodness sake, guys, seriously, it's Bigfoot. I mean, we all share this passion, this belief, and it's an amazing thing to have seen footprints, to have had an experience, to have a visual of this thing, to interact with this thing. For some of you. So I'm going to tell you right now, my prayer for next year, and I'm going to be acting on it myself. I don't care who you are or what your thing is out here with Bigfoot, but I'm gonna, if I know you and I get to know you, I'm gonna be supporting you. That's just what's gonna happen, and I'm gonna start supporting everybody that's in this Bigfoot community. I'm gonna give kudos where kudos need to be, and that's what's going to happen. I don't believe in tearing one researcher apart or other researchers apart, tearing each other apart. We should just be out here talking Bigfoot, researching Bigfoot, and that's right, doing a little entertainment on the side, getting some good campfire stories, just because we can. You know what? Let's share some campfire stories about Bigfoot over a cup of coffee around the campfire this year. How's that sound? All right? With that, Merry Christmas. Real quick, wanted to give some shout-outs real quick. First and foremost, Bigfoot Walks, with exclamation point, kind of along the lines of the book out there that I own, is a new YouTube channel, and I have to tell you, I think it's Anthony and Shannon. They're up there, I think around the Bellingham, Washington area, doing a lot of good research stuff. Anyways, they got a brand new YouTube channel, Where Bigfoot Walks with an exclamation point. You guys can find them there. I'm going to start following them. I'm going to subscribe to their YouTube channel because I want to start seeing all that awesome content that they start to come out with this next year as they do more research. Matter of fact, why don't we all just start there, getting along? Go over there and check out Anthony and Shannon over at Where Bigfoot Walks, exclamation point there on YouTube. And let's follow along and see what they got. Brown Dwarf out there in Northern California. Love you, man. You have got that stuff going on. I love it, love it, love it. Also, Mr. Monson Gunner up there, Monster X Radio, Julie, Shane, all you guys. Just some shout outs. Also going out to Cliff and, of course, Bobo. I'm telling you guys, I'm having a hard time living without finding Bigfoot. It's rough out here, I have to tell you. So I got to buy me some more DVD collections of that. I've got the first 4 or 5 seasons, so time to get some more. But with that, let's get some more of the old PacWest Bigfoot encounter stories. And remember, guys, going into this new year, I just want to let you know this may be pure entertainment, but these are also based on true encounters, reports, and things that I turn into campfire stories here that I find online or that are actually sent to me. So I do not do any sort of background checking into this. I take these, I turn them into campfire stories just for your entertainment during that smoke break at work, or keep you preoccupied from doing actual work in that cubicle. That's my job. All right, with that, let's get on to this week's PacWest Bigfoot encounter story. I will try to keep the throat clearing down a little bit, although I do, I don't know, it's kind of become a trademark. But the coffee, I can't help Sasquatch coffee. Hold on. SquatchCoffee.com. Get over there now. House sitting and the night visitors of Raymond, Washington. We were house sitting when we'd come across some really interesting night visitors that turned out to be some of the scariest things we'd ever hear and, well, see for ourselves. Bigfoot. It was 1998 to be exact, and only a few days after Christmas when my fiance and I would do some house sitting for my parents in their new vacation home outside of Raymond, Washington. That is when we'd experienced something scary, thrilling, and I have to admit, extremely exciting as far as I was concerned. Here's what we heard, saw, experienced during our winter getaway, if that's what you want to call it. The Clan of Raymond. Okay, I was actually asked to do some repairs to the place. And even against my insistence, my parents paid me top dollar for all the work I got done. I got it done regardless of the monsters that lived across the creek as well. Bigfoot. They were everywhere, it seemed, out there, and I'm sure the folks back in town knew about it. Or them, more like it. But let's start at the beginning. My parents were semi-retired before they were even 50 years old. By the time they had purchased the little vacation home, their second home in Raymond, Washington, well, outside of the town, they had hit full retirement and were still not even 55. My father was a successful entrepreneur, a very successful one, and sold off the business he started at age 35. And millions of reasons later, they decided to call working for a living over and done. From there on out, they'd own a couple, 2 or 3 vacation rentals, one on the Oregon coast and one near the town of Raymond, the new one at the time. Both of them lived in Jacksonville, Oregon at the time, but would soon move to a small town called Rouge, not that far away. And seeing how I lived not too far from the area of Raymond, it was offered to me to get some of the renovations done, remodeling, as that is what I did and do today for a living, remodeling, renovations. So, my new bride and I, we were in our first year of marriage at the time, decided we would ring in the new year with a week or 2 stay at the vacation home while I do mild repairs and put in the new cabinets and back porch. It was located way outside of town, but just close enough to have a Raymond address. It was basically the last house on an old road southwest of town that led up and into the mountains beyond. The boogeyman in the window. The house sat near a small but seasonal creek that seemed to be as full as it could be at that time of the year. We had headed out around the 27th of December, and as I said, we would be there for about a week or 2, depending on how quickly I could get the work done. All the supplies I needed were there. My dad did a great job ordering everything I'd asked for. So the first day there, I got started on the cabinets, and my wife decided to help the folks out with some of the light painting she had talked to my mother about for a couple of the rooms. Yeah, it was a beautiful home and property. I think the light snow that had fallen and was said to continue on and off, well, it added to the awesome ambiance. It also started sparking conversations about buying a house sooner than later with the both of us. It was the second day that my wife would find something strange, something I had apparently and possibly missed myself the first day there. She was out in the shed grabbing a can of paint when I heard her call for me. I headed out to see what she needed, only to find her walking around staring at the ground on the south side of the shed. It had snowed, but by that point much of it had melted away. But you could still see them. Not all too well, of course, but you could make out some rather large footprints. They may have been half melted away, but it did not take much imagination to see that they were somewhat shaped like human footprints. No complete toe impressions, mind you, but there was for sure what seemed to be heels, and these things were pretty flat and large. I did put my own foot in one of the heel, and the heel protruded at least an inch or two or so wider than my foot, and I had a boot on. It was interesting and all, but as I said, it was hard to make them out to a point, and there was only a few, so we gave it up to some crazy way in which the snow melted and headed back to work. That night, however, it would give us reason to think people were around, and those prints were in fact footprints. We had gone to bed rather late, around 11 p.m. if I remember correctly. It was my wife who woke up at the sound of something bumping or tapping the window next to her. It was not 2 seconds later she practically let out a short scream that was a short but loud shriek, really. At least that's what I would call it. I woke up and sat up immediately. She heard and saw something outside the window that required me to go outside and take a look. I found nobody except a few impressions, footprints again to be exact, around the window. I stood there, looked around for a minute but heard nothing else and saw nobody, and headed inside to find her at the kitchen table with all the lights on. She told me she had heard something tap or hit the window, just enough to wake her up. At that point she said she was looking at two pairs of greenish glowing like eyeballs that seemed to be, to me, peering at us as if they were really tall people bent over looking down into the window at us. She saw what seemed to be the silhouette of one of them, with the backlight that was available from behind it. She was not even sure if it was a person. She just said it seemed menacing. During the split few seconds she realized they were eyeballs with shoulders and shadowy faces. Shadows in the woods. Things did not really settle down, but never did we feel like we were in any real danger. But it was scary at one point. Before that, however, we started noticing the visitations were ramping up a bit, actually. From voices in the night to more footprints, things were happening that we could not really explain. I was finally moving on to some deck work that looked out and over the small seasonal creek that was currently in full roar at the time when I started seeing things in the forest beyond moving around. Oh, and I started hearing things too. We both did, actually. Anyway, I was outside and it was snowing a bit when I thought I caught some movement out of the corner of my eye. I stopped what I was doing, looked out across the creek for a moment, and when I did not see or notice anything more, I set back to work. Again, moments later, I noticed movement from the corner of my eye. This time I stared and looked a little longer, and when I saw something darker than the shadows of the forest they were in, quickly run from one position to another. The next thing I knew, another shadow was darting from one position to another not far from the last one. Whatever it was, though, it seemed tall. Not sure if it was massive at the time. It was so fast, but it was tall and on two legs, that I could tell. I called for my wife and she came out seconds later. I pointed to what looked like people or something swaying back and forth behind some trees out across the creek and into the forest. She was pretty awestruck, and so was I. Plus, I think a bit scared or freaked out. Whatever they were dark and tall and really, really fast. Bigfoot? I heard her whisper as she stood right next to me at that point. Eventually, it grew too dark to see them, and so we figured whatever they were moved off, and we got back to work chatting about what it could really be, other than some mythical beast of the woods in the Pacific Northwest. But our minds could not work around the fact of the footprints, the sightings a few nights before through a window, and the shadows that looked to be giant people moving about in the woods across the creek. Bigfoot. It was all that we could come up with. Downtown. We did run low on paint, of all things. Just the paint. So a couple days after seeing shadows in the woods, we headed into town to grab a gallon and to finish up a small room and some touch-ups. We ended up in a small hardware store with just a few employees, one of them a young lady my wife was having a rather interesting conversation with when I came around the aisle. Apparently my wife had mentioned the weirdness and night visitors we were having out there, and to her surprise, the young lady talked and acted as if it was no surprise at all. She told my wife a brief story of her and her husband, fiance at the time. They had been seeing the same shadows. However, one of them took a step out into the light and let out the scariest scream they'd ever heard in their lives. They said they both ran back to the car, and as they did, they swear they were followed all the way there. After that incident, they never returned to the area. And that area was literally within a couple miles of the vacation home. Well, we returned to the house that afternoon after a little stop for a bite to eat and carrying on the conversation of what was going on. When we did return, we decided to hang out after doing some work on the back porch and see if we could see anything else. It was dusk when we took our meals out into the cold, and it started snowing slightly again, but that didn't last long. It eventually cleared up. The winter monsters. Dinner was great. My wife is a great cook. We took it out on the back porch, or really a small deck, and decided to stand there and see if we could hear or possibly get a visual on the shadows in the woods once more. It was not until dark that we first heard something we had not experienced before. It was the sound of whoops, like monkey whoops, back and forth from one direction, and answer, it seemed, coming back from another. Whoop, whoop. It was pretty exciting, I have to say, but at the same time, as they seemed to be moving closer and closer, we started feeling pretty uncomfortable, even a bit scared, I will admit. Soon enough, we could see movement just across the creek. It was a clear night, cold, must have been around the mid to upper 30s by that point. I did grab my gun, a small .22 handgun we had for safety in our car at all times. My wife and I could make out two of them. And we could see they were real-life Bigfoot with breath. They could be seen as they exhaled and stared at us from behind and peering out from behind the trees. Of course, there were more. We could hear them walking or running about just beyond the two we could make out in the moonlight. The two moved again, closer, and this time we could tell that they were massive, dark in color, or at least they showed no color that we could tell, which made them black to us. But we did notice the hair was long enough to see it slightly blowing in the breeze on the edges as they moved and were backlit by the moon. We could tell what they were by that point, and our fascination, plus having a gun and being across a freezing cold creek, kept us there just staring at them instead of heading inside for safety. To be honest, we were pretty scared, but we felt no sense of urgency to run and hide or even shoot at them. I think the scared part was the fact that we were just processing what they were and how enormous they had been. And I'm guessing, but I'd put the larger one at around 9 foot and the other one around the smaller one at least about 7 foot. We could not make out faces, but the bodies were tall, somewhat wide at the shoulders, but the hips seemed smaller, way smaller, like a huge V-shaped person covered in hair was just standing there. They moved really fast, like wisps of shadows darting from one tree to another, and always coming closer to the water's edge. After a couple minutes of this, we finally saw movement behind the other two, but they never came close enough to get a sense, so we could get a sense of the real height or the kind of detail we had on the other two. Then, suddenly, my wife let out a short gasp as our attention came back to the creek. And there, standing up to its ankle in it, was the tallest one. Still, from being backlit, we could not see much of the face except for the glowing-like or shimmering green eyes that stood there still as a breeze on a summer day, staring us down. With a sudden grunt and a short but guttural growl, it turned as quick as it came and darted off back into the forest. The rest seemed to follow after a few seconds or so, and after a few more minutes a howl could be heard deep, from within the woods. A howl followed by a sharp shriek. They were gone. The rest of the night was quiet. No more shadows and monsters would reveal themselves. Bigfootin' today. We've been asked by the few we have told our story to if we do any Bigfooting today. The answer is no, and that is an emphatic no. I get trying to prove what really does exist out here to unbelieving masses, but there is a fine line to put my wife or myself into harm's way. And while we never felt as though we were in any mortal danger, I can say that these things are and seemed wild, and that I would never test. We do enjoy the outdoors, camping, fishing, and hiking, but we do keep that extra pair of eyes out for sign and ears to the ground. And to this day, we do not care to have another encounter, period. But that is our encounter story. Thanks, Brenda and Colin.